Story 1. The office printer only ran at 3:17 a.m., but no one was logged in. This happened to me in late 2017. I worked the overnight shift as a security tech at a mid-sized logistics firm just outside Chicago. Not much happened during the graveyard hours, mostly just monitoring motion sensors, logging maintenance tickets, and killing time in the back office while the rest of the building slept. The office itself was a low-slung, two-story structure with a warehouse extension. The upper floor had been vacant for years, gutted during budget cuts, but they still made me walk through it once per shift. The air always felt slightly colder up there. My desk was tucked in a narrow control room with a wall of old monitors and a terminal that linked into the building's internal systems: HVAC, access control, printer queue, lights. Most nights were dead silent, aside from the hum of power running through the walls. At exactly 3:17 a.m. one Thursday, a sound broke the silence. It was faint at first, a mechanical rhythm, low and clinical. Brrr, clunk, brrr, clunk. It took me a few seconds to place it. It was the sound of the main office printer warming up, the same one that hadn't been used in weeks. I sat forward, opened the system logs. Nothing, no one had logged into the workstation, no queued print jobs. But I could hear it, clearly, echoing from the front hallway. I got up and walked the length of the main floor, peering through glassed cubicles until I reached the printer. Sure enough, the machine's indicator light was blinking. Its screen showed a job in progress. Page 1 of 17. It spat out a sheet. Blank. Another. Blank. I waited until the last one ejected. The final page had a black dot, no more than 3 mm wide, stamped dead center. I cancelled the job, opened the queue. Still nothing. I figured it was a glitch in the system and powered the printer off manually. The screen faded, the noise stopped. I went back to my post. That night, it happened again. 3:17 a.m. on the dot. This time I didn't waste time going through the computer. I just walked straight to the hallway. The printer was on again, whirring, ejecting the same blank pages. I pulled the plug from the wall. It stopped. 2 nights later, I removed the plug before my shift even started. Still, at 3:17 a.m., the noise began again. This time it wasn't in the hallway. It was faint, farther, lower. I followed it, walking past the break room and storage closets, down the maintenance stairwell. I stopped outside the old mailroom. The sound was unmistakable. Printing. I opened the door. The room was dark, completely empty. No printer. Just old shelving and a layer of dust that had settled over the years. I stood still and just listened. The noise faded after 30 seconds. I reported the malfunction the next day, and the company brought in IT support to reformat the printer's firmware. They said the job queue had been wiped clean and the system had no records of overnight print jobs. They left it at that. But the next week, at exactly 3:17, it began again. No matter how many times I shut it off, unplugged it, or checked the network logs, nothing changed. So, one night, I lost patience. I took a wrench from the maintenance cabinet and beat the printer until the casing cracked and the screen went dark for good. The following night, there was no printer. I made sure of it. I had thrown the pieces into the dumpster out back. Still, at 3:17 a.m. sharp, from somewhere deep inside the building's bones, I heard the whirring start again. A rhythmic noise, as if it were coming from behind the walls, like something was still printing. After that, I started digging. I wanted to see if maybe the printer wasn't the problem. Maybe it was the system, something embedded deeper. The control terminal had access to archives. With some persistence, I managed to override the standard user privileges and access print logs dating back over a decade. The data was messy, fragmented. I filtered by time, only one time, 3:17 a.m. I was half hoping it would return nothing. Instead, I got a hit. March 3rd, 1987. Print job timestamp, 3:17:08 a.m., 17 pages. I stared at the screen. The file name was a string of random characters. The user ID was blank. The workstation ID matched the one just outside the control room, the exact same one still in use. I searched for other entries. Same result, March 10th, 1987, then March 17th. Always a Tuesday, always 3:17, always 17 pages, and always blank except for the last page, a black mark in the center. My stomach sank. I pulled up internal staff records. Personnel logs from 1987 were sparse, but eventually I found an entry tied to the print workstation. A man named Henry Talbot. He was listed as an overnight systems supervisor, hired in '85. Termination date, none. He wasn't fired, he wasn't transferred. His file just stopped. There was a note, a scanned memo from HR. Employee Henry Talbot failed to report for duty on March 24th. No contact has been made. Notified authorities per protocol. I froze when I read the last line. Last recorded activity, 3:17 a.m. System print initiation. I tried to find more, but the file was corrupted. The text broke down into gibberish. I reached out to one of the older employees who'd been around since the 90s. I asked if he'd ever heard the name. He went quiet for a long moment, then said, "You don't need to be poking into that. Just let it be." Then he walked away. I tried searching for local police reports from that year, but none were digitized. When I requested records at the local station, they couldn't find anything matching that name. Still, the logs didn't lie. Every Tuesday since 1987 at 3:17 a.m., a 17-page file had been processed, same format, same size, even after the printer was gone. I couldn't explain it. I didn't know how to stop it. I spent weeks obsessing over what I'd found. A contact from a nearby college, someone with a background in digital forensics, explained something that stayed with me. Orphaned routines, he said. It's a real thing. When an automated system loses its parent process, sometimes it loops. Indefinitely, especially if the system's designed to persist. I asked what happens if the parent was a person. He didn't answer. I tried disabling all scheduled tasks. Nothing changed. I deleted the system drivers. It came back. I switched shifts with another guard just once to see if the print job would still trigger. It did. On my next shift, I came in early. I shut down power to the entire admin wing at 3 a.m. Lights off, doors locked, no network access. Still, at 3:17, I heard it. The same slow rhythm emanating from deep in the walls. And this time, my terminal turned on by itself. I watched as a file was generated in real time. 17 pages. I hit the eject key out of instinct. The tray opened. There was nothing in it, but behind me, on the desk, 17 printed sheets stacked neatly, all blank, except the final one. I picked it up. The ink wasn't quite dry yet. A single line ran across the center. "We know you're leaving." My last shift was 2 days later. I didn't tell anyone. The printer hasn't been replaced. But I heard from someone just last week, someone who picked up the overnight tech job after me. They said everything's been smooth, except for one thing. They don't like Tuesday nights. They keep hearing something print, and no one's ever logged in. Story 2. Every light I turned off was already back on before I finished the haul. This happened to me in the fall of 2018. At the time, I worked custodial night shifts at a mid-sized technical college in western Pennsylvania. The kind of place built in the early 70s, brown brick, exposed pipes, windowless classrooms. Outdated but still functioning because no one had the budget or the will to overhaul it. My shift ran from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m., 5 nights a week. The main building, Harding Hall, was always empty by 8:30. Staff and students cleared out quickly. I rarely saw another person after I arrived. It was a quiet job, the kind that makes you start humming just to hear sound bounce back. The building had 3 levels, 2 above ground, 1 sub-level. I was responsible for sweeping and mopping all corridors, emptying trash, and cleaning restrooms on all floors, including a few basement classrooms no longer in use. Routine became ritual pretty quickly. I had a cart I pushed through the halls, a rotation for which floor to start with, and a habit of keeping all lights off behind me as I moved. There was no need to leave them on. About 3 weeks into the job, I started noticing small things that felt wrong. It began with the broom. I had just finished mopping the west hallway on the second floor, left the broom leaned against the wall at the corridor's midpoint, planning to return for it after I let the floor dry. 10 minutes later, I circled back and stopped. The broom wasn't against the wall anymore. It was standing upright, unsupported, directly in the center of the hallway. I stared at it. At first, I thought maybe it had slipped and landed that way. I even smiled a little. Those cheap plastic-bottomed brooms were oddly balanced, but when I picked it up, the bristles were dry, bone dry. The floor around it? Dry, too. Clean. As if no mop had touched it. I checked the hallway I'd just done. It had been mopped. The streaks were still drying, the faint scent of bleach hanging in the air. But the center of that hall, where I'd left the broom, was untouched. I convinced myself I'd made a mistake, that I'd skipped that section and forgotten. It was a long shift. I was tired. A week later, something else. I had turned off all the hallway lights on the second floor and was headed downstairs. I remember flicking each switch as I went, plunging the floor into a slow, progressive darkness behind me. But when I reached the stairwell and looked back, every light was on again. Not just one I might have missed. All of them. White fluorescent buzzing overhead. I stood there longer than I should have, one hand on the rail, looking back into the lit corridor I'd just turned dark. No sound, no motion. I walked the floor again. Nothing seemed off. But when I tested the lights again, this time watching in real time, I flipped each switch and stood still after each one. Off, off, off. I turned to leave. By the time I reached the far end, they were all back on. Not instantly. It was as if each one came back just after I passed the previous one. Like I was being followed by light. I stood at the end of the hallway and turned slowly. Nothing. Just the corridor I worked in every night, humming like always. But I didn't go back upstairs for the rest of the shift. From then on, I stopped turning the lights off. I left them on until the end. Even then, I did it quickly, one master panel before I left. But it didn't matter. The place started doing things on its own. The next week, I found my mop bucket filled when I arrived. My gear was stored dry. I never left it full. My cart was repositioned near the elevator instead of where I parked it. Once, I came in and found all the trash already emptied from the second floor bins. Liners tied, new ones set, but I was the only person on duty that night. No one had been there before me. The log showed my key card as the only access in or out. Still, everything was done. Like the building didn't need me anymore. Like it had started taking care of itself. It got to a point where I needed proof. I started recording the hallway on my phone, first just short clips, then full time-lapse videos propped on the corner shelf of my janitor's closet, aimed down the hallway, hoping I'd catch one of the lights turning back on or the cart being moved. For 3 nights, I filmed and reviewed everything the next morning. Nothing, just dim, grainy footage of still hallways and flickering fluorescence. On the 4th night, I let the camera run again, same angle. But when I opened the file the next day, something was different. First, the audio was gone. Then the video stopped playing around the halfway mark. It jumped, glitched like corrupted tape. The file length still read 7 hours, but it skipped ahead. The timestamp rolled straight from 02:04:31 to 03:17 now. Then nothing, except for one single frame that didn't match the rest. I nearly dropped my phone when I paused it. The hallway looked normal at first, dim, empty, slightly out of focus. But halfway down the corridor, a figure was visible, blurry, cropped by the edge of a door frame, not stepping out, stepping in, as if walking backwards into the room, mid-turn. The head was turned toward the camera, no facial detail, no motion blur. but the figure was facing the lens, looking. It wasn't a reflection. The hallway didn't have glass doors, and the camera hadn't moved. I tried enhancing it, exported the frame to a friend who knew image processing. He sent it back with a short note, too little detail to ID, but the figure's proportions are strange, long, not distorted by motion. This isn't lens error. He asked where I filmed it. I told him I didn't know anymore. I deleted the footage that night. I didn't record again, but the next shift, something else changed. When I arrived, my locker was unlocked. That had never happened. I always double-checked it before leaving. Inside was a note, folded, no envelope. It was typed, not handwritten. Camera interference detected, please discontinue. No signature, no logo. I stared at it for a long time. Then I put it back in the locker. Next night, all the hallway lights were already on. I started doing research. Not about Harding Hall specifically, about buildings, about places like it, old, overused spaces, institutions, public facilities with long histories and layered routines. What I found was fragmented, mostly forum posts, incident reports buried in OSH databases, some threads on janitorial subreddits. A recurring phrase kept showing up, reverse maintenance. Supposedly, it described instances where the environment seemed to correct itself. Chairs returned to perfect alignment without staff touching them. Paper towels restocked in locked dispensers no one remembered opening. Spills cleaned, lights turned off, without witness or schedule. No fingerprints. No audit trail. Just spaces returning to order on their own. One forum mentioned a theory that some buildings, after enough time, enough repetition, start enforcing routine, not through ghosts, not through people, but through pattern, as if memory itself became embedded in the structure. And when human presence weakened, that memory acted, reenacted. I tried to dismiss it. I told myself I was just tired, overworked, isolated, but something had shifted. On my final week, I started noticing new details. Trash bins emptied before I reached them, restroom mirrors cleaned, lights dimmed to energy-saving mode before I even stepped inside, rooms already reset. On my last night, I didn't even bring my cart. I just walked the building. Every hallway was spotless, desks perfectly centered, chairs tucked in, trash bins lined, restrooms glistening, not a fingerprint in sight. I walked to my locker out of habit. It was open. Inside, another note. Typed again. Plain paper. You're late. That was it. No signature. I walked out without locking the building. It didn't seem like it needed me to anymore. The lights turned off behind me, one by one. Did you enjoy the content and it made a difference for you? Click on Super Thanks and support our work. Story 3. I heard someone typing in the cubicle beside me, but no one was scheduled. This happened to me in late 2019. I was working the night support shift for a financial processing firm based out of Hartford. It wasn't a glamorous job, just handling off-hour server pings, running nightly system checks, flagging incomplete imports. But the pay was good, and I liked the solitude. Our building was a converted insurance office. 4 floors, open-plan cubicles, ancient coffee machines. Night staff were minimal. Just me, a guy from IT who worked from home, and one contracted cleaner who came in for 2 hours between midnight and 2 a.m. I always set up in Cubicle 43B. It was closest to the hallway, and the only one with a working overhead light that didn't flicker. I kept my own mug in the drawer and a thin cushion on the chair because the padding had long since given up. It was a silent job. No phones, no co-workers, no calls. Just the occasional fan hum and the low mutter of code updates running on the background screens. One Tuesday around 3 a.m., I heard it. Typing, light, precise. 2 or 3 quick keystrokes, then silence. A pause, then more. Rapid fire like someone filling out form fields. It was coming from the next cubicle, 43A. At first I assumed someone had come in unexpectedly, a late-night data entry shift or a freelance contractor using the workspace. We sometimes had those. I stood and peeked over the divider. Empty. The screen was dark, the chair still pushed in, but the sound was unmistakable. A soft tap, 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 followed by a few seconds of silence. I stepped into the cubicle. Nothing, no sound now. Just the dim green LED blinking on the monitor, waiting for a wake command. I went back to my desk. After that night, I began noticing a pattern. Always around the same time, between 3:08 and 3:20 a.m., the typing would begin. Sometimes just a few taps, other times long bursts like someone sprinting through a thought. But it wasn't random. The more I listened, the more I began to distinguish a rhythm. It wasn't productive typing, it was corrective. Each burst was followed by a pause. Then a long stream of backspaces, not one or two keys, full lines being erased. Sometimes the keys clacked so violently it sounded angry. Type, pause, backspace, pause, more typing. Like someone struggling to get something right. Caught in a loop, never satisfied. I stopped listening with curiosity. I started listening with caution. Because the more nights I stayed late, the more it seemed deliberate, focused, centered in the same cubicle. 43A. A cubicle no one had sat in since I started. One night I pressed my ear against the divider. The typing was right on the other side. No whispering, no footsteps, no chair creaking, just keys. And then, clear as day, the return key being hit, a pause, and backspace again. Nothing ever got submitted. I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was noise, air ducts, keyboard settling, but I'm not that gullible. So one night, I waited until the typing had just stopped. Then I moved into the cubicle, sat down, turned on the screen. Nothing was open. No windows, no terminal sessions, just the login prompt. But the cursor was blinking like someone had already tried typing and left it. I used my admin credentials to check the event log. No activity under any current usernames. But then I found something odd. The audit history showed a system event around 3:14 a.m. that night, right when I'd heard the typing. A user login attempt from that terminal. The ID was scrambled at first. But once I expanded the metadata, the record showed user 43A, status, disabled. I cross-referenced it with the Access database. The user was marked inactive as of 04/12/2015. The field labeled deactivation reason was blank. I called IT the next morning, just to ask if maybe it was a reactivated test account or something lingering from a previous hire. The guy on the phone paused for a long time before saying, "That account shouldn't be active. That workstation's been cold for years." When I asked who used to sit in 43A, he didn't answer right away. Then he said, "I wasn't supposed to mention this, but if you're hearing things, maybe just don't work too close to that desk." I pressed him, asked why. He sighed and said the only thing HR ever released about 2015 was that a contractor had an incident. That's how they worded it. Just an incident. No one had worked that cubicle since. He told me to delete the audit entry and log out. I didn't. That night I checked again. This time, the login had gone deeper. The file access log showed something more recent. Someone, or something, had opened the Notepad app. At 3:17 a.m., nothing was saved, no files created, but the system log still showed it ran. I opened Notepad manually and typed a sentence, waited, typed another. Then I sat there, hands still, listening. 5 minutes passed. Then, I swear, without me touching the keyboard, a string of backspaces erased what I'd written, like someone disagreeing, correcting. I shut the machine off and walked away. I started searching for similar cases, and I found them, not just haunted offices or stories from Reddit, academic write-ups, white papers from digital anthropology journals. They called it residual digital presence, a theory that in certain high-routine environments, offices, data centers, archives, the sheer repetition of behavior creates symbolic residue, not conscious, not sentient, but patterned. Behavioral echoes embedded in the tools, the layout, the structure of the environment. Keystrokes that reoccur in the absence of fingers. Mouse movements logged without hardware. Even specific applications opening themselves at the times most often used. Not ghost stories. Patterns. One case in Denmark involved an HR system that auto-sorted phantom entries into a queue every Tuesday night at 10:11 p.m. Exactly when a former employee used to finalize weekly payroll. She died in the building in 2011. Her system credentials were never used again, and yet the behavior persisted. I couldn't shake the sense that something like that was happening in 43A. The cubicle didn't need a user anymore. It remembered one. I stopped sitting in my usual spot. I started working from a break room with my laptop, but I still heard the typing, even through the walls, same time, every night. One night, my last, I stayed late, later than usual. I walked over to 43A with a sticky note. I wrote 6 words. "What are you trying to say?" I stuck it gently to the monitor and left. Didn't think about it until the next day. I came in early, before the cleaning crew, before the morning techs. The note was gone, but the monitor was on, not locked, not logged out, just on. And on the screen, one sentence, black text on a white notepad window, typed, perfectly centered. I never logged out. No cursor, no user session, just those words. I took a photo, then I powered the computer down. That was my final shift. I handed in my badge that same afternoon. No one ever called to ask why. No one followed up. But sometimes I still think about that last line. Not, "I died here." Not, "Help me." Just that. I never logged out. As if some part of them was still waiting, still typing, still trying to finish a sentence no one else would read.